Part 191. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1901. Seeing that the emperor had some doubts, Mingda said, although his attitude is still not good, he is obviously doing something good for the other party, but he has to say bad things. The queen on the side said, this is a bit like your father and emperor. Emperor. The queen said to the emperor, you father and son are too similar in temperament, especially when you were young. The emperor didn't believe it, I'm not his dog temper. The queen laughed silently. The emperor felt hurt, so he took Mingda to continue discussing the plan to reconcile the two sons. Mingda said carefully what Bai Shan and Zhou Man discussed with them, father, look, didn't the third brother also sue the prince's brother? This is the improvement. The emperor said, your third brother didn't sue the crown prince before. Mingda had a sullen expression on his face, and he held it for a while without holding back. Then why does the royal father lose his temper with the prince's brother every time he sees the third brother, and decides that the prince's brother is bullying the third brother? The emperor opened his mouth and wanted to say that this is not a well-known thing. But when he met his wife and daughter's gaze, he was speechless for a while. The emperor was silent for a long time and then said, just now Dalan said bad things about Saburo. Mingda said, brother prince is a knife-mouthed tofu-hearted man. The queen also said, his temper should be changed. Although he doesn't need to publicize his good deeds, he shouldn't say bad words again. Bad words are also hurtful. After that, she looked at Mingda and Changyu who was standing beside him in a daze, and said solemnly, in the future, whether you disagree with others, or get angry and quarrel, you must not speak evil words, you know. Mingda and Changyu bowed their heads and responded. The emperor looked at the two daughters and then thought about the two sons. He regretted it a little. At the beginning, he should not have brought the prince and Prince Gong himself, and should have given the two boys to the queen to raise them. The queen has already said, let Zhou Man and the three get up. This matter has nothing to do with them. Saburo's temper is too impatient. Dalan teases Saburo for fun, and punishes him to kneel in the ancestral hall for half a day. The emperor who only intended to punish the prince to kneel outside the hall for an hour to show the ministers could not help but whispered, is it too heavy? The queen was angry, two children quarrel, you are partial to Saburo, one child is in trouble, and you are not willing to punish, you are right and wrong, and the reward and punishment are unclear. Seeing her blushing with anger, the emperor quickly comforted her and said, Zi Tong, I'm not afraid that the punishment will be too severe, isn't De Lang resenting Saburo and me? The queen flung her sleeves and left, turning around to go to the apse to see Prince Gong go. The emperor quickly followed up to coax her. Mingda got up from the ground, Changyu stepped forward to help her, and asked in confusion, what should I do? It's all right, let the royal father go to coax the queen mother. Mingda took Changyu to the front door to see the four kneeling people. She said to the prince, brother, the queen mother asked you to kneel at the ancestral hall. The prince's face froze, and he looked up at Mingda. Mingda nodded slightly and said to him, the queen mother said that you shouldn't make fun of the third brother. After that, he said to the three kneeling Zhou Man, you guys get up, this matter has nothing to do with you. The three of Manbao looked at each other and knew that Mingda had persuaded the empress, so they kowtowed and thanked the emperor and empress and got up. The prince also stood up slowly, not wanting to kneel at the ancestral hall. He has become a father, what does it look like when he goes to kneel at the ancestral hall again? But this was the queen's order, and he obviously couldn't disobey, so he walked out with his head drooping. Mingda saw that the four of them had left, so he took Changyu to the apse to see King Gong. Bai Erlang followed them out in confusion, and couldn't help asking, this is the end? Bai Shan asked, what else do you want? When they reached the fork outside the hall, the three of them bowed and stood aside to watch the prince turn to kneel at the ancestral hall. When he was far away, The three of them saw that even the little eunuch who led the way had not left them, so they did not rush to leave, but went out slowly. Because of the rest of their lives, the three of them quietly let out a sigh of relief. Bai Erlang looked sympathetic. Prince is so pitiful, His Majesty is too partial. Bai Shan and Man Bao both nodded, but shook their heads again, and said to him, Your Majesty is really partial, but the prince is not so pitiful. Bai Shandao, Your Majesty favors Prince Gong between Prince Gong and the Crown Prince, and favors the prince between the prince and the courtiers. Originally, both of them were at fault. Logically, both of them should be punished. Not only the Crown Prince and Man Bao will be punished, but Prince Gong will also be punished. Why did he kick the table? Are you dissatisfied with the prince or the emperor? Seriously speaking, don't look at Prince Gong's broken leg, but according to the standards of courtiers, Prince Gong's fault is above the Crown Prince. It's just that the emperor felt sorry for Prince Gong, so he scolded the prince first and let the prince take the blame, but he was afraid that the courtiers would really put the prince into the blame of unfriendly brothers, so he limited this matter to family affairs first, and did not issue a decree to reprimand the prince, but directly let him kneel outside the hall. Even Man Bao got a little bit of light and was punished to kneel directly. Otherwise, he would have been taken down for questioning. I am afraid that he would not be able to get out if he did not ask clearly about what happened in the room. It was precisely because Bai Shan had calculated the emperor's partiality that he dared to intercede with Mingda. Before it became a big thing, he should make the big things small and the small things into small ones. Otherwise, Man Beijing will be locked up, and if he asks questions afterwards, it is possible that Dali Temple or Jingzhou Mansion will come to question him, but he will have to go to Mingtang. Bai Shan knew exactly how the officials made mistakes. Man Bao, who was already an official, nodded again and again. Hey, who told Prince Gong that it was not a medical accident, but an added injury? Otherwise, it would be our imperial physician's office to ask questions first. Bai Erlang pondered for a while and said, It's really troublesome. I knew earlier that I wouldn't allow Princess Mingda to go to see Prince Gong's injuries. Man Bao doesn't think so. It's hard to buy money. Know it? If there is only one known in this world, there are too many things that can be changed. Bai Shan nodded, so since the matter has happened, let's settle it. The three walked through the Taiji Hall slowly, and then turned to the corridor to go out, intending to leave the palace. As a result, they arrived at the gate of the palace, and the two little waiters ran to them out of breath, shouting, Emperor Zhou, Emperor Zhou. The three of them froze for a moment, and turned to look at the little maid running towards them at the far end of the corridor. Bai Shan said, Can we turn around and pretend we didn't hear it at this time? Man Bao, are you dreaming? Bai Erlang complained, I want you to shout that your knees hurt. Now it's all right, leave early, and you won't be stopped when you leave the palace. Man Bao and Bai Shan couldn't help but said, You didn't cry out in pain just now. After speaking, the two became worried again. The emperor doesn't want to call us back to kneel again, right? Bai Erlang turned his head and said to Bai Shan, Just call Man Bao, or let's go. Bai Shan thought seriously. Man Bao didn't want to take them and be punished together, but when he saw Bai Shan really thinking about it, he suddenly became annoyed and shouted, You dare! If you dare to leave me alone, I will. Bai Shan smiled and asked, How about you? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1902. When Man Bao heard his laughter and saw his smiling face again, he snorted in anger, turned his face away and ignored him. Bai Shan chuckled softly and wanted to speak, but the two servants had already run up to him. Bai Erlang, who was on the side, stopped talking for a long time, and stood there unhappily with his mouth pursed, as if he had eaten 2 pounds of vinegar. The two chamberlains ran up panting, bowed, and said, Dr. Zhou, Your Majesty asked you to go to the East Palace. Manbao was startled and asked, "Did your majesty kick his highness out of trouble?" "No," the servant said, "I want to see the family members of the Eastern Palace." Manbao was startled again, "Is something wrong with the crown princess?" "No," the servant said vaguely after tangled for a while, "you can see if you take a look. It's Tu Fenji." Bai Shan couldn't help but turn his eyes slightly. Fenji could also ask a 6th grade imperial doctor to see him when he was sick. Although Manbao would not refuse anyone who came to him, he still had to have someone come to the door, so that Manbao would go to Fenyi to see a doctor according to His Majesty's order. Bai Shan said to Manbao, "Let's go, we'll accompany you to the East Palace." Bai Shan thought about it, and Manbao naturally thought of it too, nodded, turned around and went to the East Palace with the 2 servants. Manbao got along well with most of the servants in the palace, so he soon heard some news from the 2 servants. Hearing that the prince came to the ancestral hall to kneel on the front foot, the princess sent someone to the Taiji hall eagerly to report, saying that the 2 Fenji in the palace were unwell and seemed to be pregnant, but she was not sure. Because all the good doctors in the imperial physician office had asked the emperor to see King Gong's legs, she sent someone to ask the queen to show her. Not to mention the queen, even the emperor knows her thoughts. It is nothing more than fear that the prince will be severely punished by him, but the emperor no longer wants to care about it at this time, just want to know whether the 2 Fenji in the East Palace are really pregnant. The prince now has only one son, which is still too few. Although the concubine is far inferior to the direct descendant, it is also a bloodline, isn't it? So the emperor transferred Imperial Physician Lu and Imperial Physician Lu from the Taiji Palace to the East Palace, and at the same time asked people to find Zhou Man. After all, she is a female family member, so Zhou Man is more convenient than Imperial Physician Lu and Imperial Physician Lu. When Manbao arrived at the East Palace, Imperial Physician Lu and Imperial Physician Lu had also arrived. They took turns to check the pulse of the 2 Fenji, and after asking some questions, they gave Manbao their place. Manbao asked carefully, and after feeling the pulse, he stood with Imperial Physician Lu, and without discussing it, the 3 of them told the Crown Princess and Gu Zhong who was waiting outside, "I'm pregnant, Cao Fenji. It should be 3 months pregnant. Zhang Fenji's life is shorter, but it is also 2 months." Gu Zhong was overjoyed, and he rejoiced with the Crown Princess. The Crown Princess also had a beaming look on her face, and happily rewarded the imperial physicians and the entire Eastern Palace. In fact, she already knew it, and had been hiding it before, but she wanted to wait until the day stabilized. It was supposed to wait another month, but who made the Crown Prince make a mistake? I don't know what the emperor scolded people like. The concubine started planning to reveal this after the prince and the others entered the palace, so he didn't know that the prince was not only scolded, but also kicked by the emperor, and is now kneeling in the ancestral hall. The Crown Princess held the handkerchief and Gu Zhong worriedly said, "His Royal Highness is away, the East Palace has lost its backbone, and the worshippers are uneasy, and they don't know if it will affect the children." When Gu Zhong heard it, he didn't care what he thought, but his face showed the same worry as the Crown Princess, and then said that he would report to the emperor. The Crown Princess was grateful to have Gu Zhong sent out, and sent away the Imperial Dr. Lu who winked with Manbao, and the Imperial Dr. Lu naturally would not stay. When only the people from the East Palace were left in the room, the Crown Princess asked Manbao, "What's going on?" "I only vaguely heard that the Crown Prince broke King Gong's leg." "Manbao, who said this?" The Crown Prince said sadly, "Who else has it been passed on? It's spread all over the world. You ask someone to go to the imperial city to inquire about it, and there are people who say that the prince beat Prince Gong to be half-hearted. Fortunately, it is now Xiu Mu, the 6th Yamen. There are only people on duty, otherwise I don't know what it will be like." The 3 of Manbao were stunned. The Crown Princess asked, "So, did Prince Gong beat the Crown Prince?" The 3 shook their heads together, but nodded together. The princess asked, "Is this true or not?" Man Bao cleared his throat and said, "Prince Gong and Prince Gong had a discussion, but Prince Gong's leg was not interrupted by the prince, it just had a little relationship with the prince." Man Bao glanced at the two worried pregnant women beside him, and then recounted what happened in a euphemistic manner. "As soon as I heard that the prince was only kicked and punished to kneel at the ancestral hall, the princess suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. That's good, but worry about me." The two Fenji also breathed a sigh of relief. Although Bai Shan and Man Bao explained that kneeling at the ancestral hall seemed to be a light punishment, for Bai Erlang, he was still somewhat unacceptable, because looking at the grievances between the prince and Prince Gong, it was obvious that the prince had the right. This time, it was obvious that King Gong broke his leg by kicking himself, so why did they all look relieved? However, the princess had already said with a relaxed expression to the two Fenji, "Prince is fine, you can raise your baby at ease, especially Zhang Fenji, your days are short, and you will be less likely to go out recently, this palace will jin you as Chinjui, and wait for you. If you give birth to a child, if it is a boy, you will be promoted to Liang Di, and if it is a girl, you will be promoted to Liang Yuan." The two were overjoyed when they heard the words, and they knelt down and responded with a yes. The princess didn't let them kneel for a long time, and someone helped them down to rest. Fenji was the lowest position beside the prince, just like the general room beside the son of a noble family outside. At this moment, they had already jumped 2 levels in a row to be promoted to Chinjui. The Lushi who lost her child the year before last was Chinjui, who served as the concubine of the prince. As soon as she became pregnant, she was taken care of by the prince and took care of her. She was already going to be promoted to Liang Di, but it was only temporarily to protect her and the child. Press down. But Dong Gong knew that at that time, the prince and the princess made a promise to Lu that as long as she gave birth to a child safely, regardless of gender, Dong Gong would ask her to be named a concubine of the prince, second only to the concubine. Once the prince ascended the throne, the concubine can be directly promoted to the imperial concubine. At that time, Dong Gong didn't know how many people envied her, but they didn't expect that they could become Chinjui, and possibly Liangdi and Liang Yuan by relying on the child in their womb. As soon as they left, the crown princess took Man Bao's hand and said, "Although there are already eagle slaves in the East Palace, the children are still too thin, and I will ask you to come and see them more in the future, to ensure that they can give birth safely." "Child?" Man Bao nodded and asked, "The people who serve them around?" "I asked someone to arrange it, all of them have experience." The princess smiled and said, "You can help me go through it at that time, don't let me be fooled." The eyes of the crown princess shone brightly. When she waited for more children in the East Palace, who would dare to say that the crown prince could not have children? Good night. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1903. The little grandson is almost half a year old, and he still can't sit still. He can only sway from side to side when he is placed on the wooden couch, and it has been longer since the princess was pregnant. If it was said that the previous year was to ensure that the crown princess would lead the husband to the eldest son, the East Palace was deliberately contraceptive, but in the past 5 months, the East Palace had not been pregnant, and the courtiers were still a little worried. But this is good. Imperial Dr. Lu and the others left the East Palace on the front feet, and the prince on the hind feet was released from the ancestral hall, and went back to the East Palace to appease people's hearts. When the courtiers took leave to go to the Yamen, although there were still people who impeached the prince for being unfriendly to his brothers, the tone of the court was still mostly cheerful. It's just that Prince Gong is in decline. The emperor originally wanted the crown prince to take over the wrong place, but he made the big and small matters smaller, but he didn't expect the East Palace to be pregnant. he was so happy that he could only watch the courtiers impeach Prince Gong. Although King Gong was beaten by the Crown Prince during the discussion, it was the Crown Prince's fault, but the courtiers asked about the pulse case, whether it was added by Zhou Man later, or the pulse case made by Xiao Yuanzheng and the others, all showed that King Gong was on his own. The wounds are minor abrasions. Let's learn from each other, who hasn't wrestled yet. So this is normal in the eyes of everyone, and even more normal in the eyes of generals. But it was not normal for Prince Gong to kick his own leg off because of an argument with the prince. Therefore, the prince was impeached, and Prince Gong was impeached even more. Even some censors tried to figure him out with the most vicious mentality, thinking that he was extremely dissatisfied with the prince. The Crown Prince is not only the elder brother of King Gong, but also the next heir to the country. You are dissatisfied with the next heir, what do you want? Even when Prince Gong was recovering from his injury, he was scolded like a dog. This was something that King Gong didn't expect, but the emperor expected it. He finally looked at his wife and daughter, and then at the prince, and couldn't help but find a way for the queen. Didn't you also say that this is Dalin's fault? Just watching Saburo being scolded. The queen was not feeling well, but said, they are right. Saburo has a great opinion on Dalin. Emperor. The queen said, let them scold. If Saburo can figure it out, it's best. If you can't figure it out, you can just fine him. But Erlang, the queen suddenly called him by the title he used to call him when he was not an emperor, and said in a low voice, you are blindly pressing the boss and pampering the third. The relationship between their brothers will not be good. Look at these 2 days, the boss. Have you been to see the third one? The emperor frowned. I know, you want the boss to stop hurting the younger brother, but there is still life between the two of them. Even if the boss figured it out and knew the past, he also accounted for part of it, and part of it was by the third child's side. People pushed the flames, but the third child did think about replacing him. Human hearts are made of flesh, and it doesn't hurt when being cut. The third child wants to replace the elder brother. Has he ever thought about the fate of his elder brother? The queen said in a low voice, never. A waste prince who can live the rest of his life in peace. Back then, wasn't the battle between you and your uncle and third uncle a matter of life and death? The emperor was shocked, and his heart was angry, and deeply sad. The queen sat on the couch without moving, turned her back to the emperor slightly, and said to him, I didn't want to talk about these things, I don't have much time, I just want to make your father and son harmonious. I don't know if what I insist on is right or wrong, after all, Dalin has no children. The queen's voice was low, and she choked, I often worry that if he has no children, his throne will be unstable in the future. How much will the people of the world and future generations resent me? Hearing this, the somewhat angry emperor hurriedly stepped forward and sat beside her, held her hand and said, what does this have to do with you? It's my fault if I say something wrong, don't they all say that I'm not in the right position? Punish me. The queen shook her head slightly and continued, Erlang, the boss had no heirs before, but now he has the eldest son. If you continue to favor Saburo like this, it will only be bad for Saburo, not the slightest benefit. The emperor was silent for a while. The queen didn't say any more, even if it was a husband and wife, some things couldn't be mentioned clearly. But if you don't pick it out, the emperor can also guess some. After all, the queen was also saddened by King Gong. 2 children, she has always been, even including Mingda and Changjiu, she has always tried to make a bowl of water level. Chang Yu was not born to her, but since she was a child, she kept a dowry for her, which was similar to that of Prince Gong. In contrast, she should be more strict with the prince, because the prince has to study and practice martial arts with many masters, and also follow the emperor to govern. On the contrary, Prince Gong has been by her side for longer. The queen never thought that he would have such thoughts before. She had persuaded and beaten him more than once, but the child dealt with her in his mouth, but kept his actions in private. It would be fine if the prince was faint, but when he thought about it, apart from having no heirs, the prince had nothing special in his behavior, and was still a qualified heir recognized by the courtiers. He wants to replace the prince, and the prince will die. She is a mother, even Mingda, with the physical condition of their mother and daughter. I am afraid that they will also die. The emperor can't see this, but the queen can. That's why she was so sad. She is his biological mother, and the prince and Mingda are his brothers and sisters. How can he be so selfish and narrow-minded? How much love and generosity can he have towards the world? He has the ruthlessness of being an emperor, but he does not have the passion of being an emperor. Therefore, the queen has always been not optimistic about him. Even if the prince has been childless, she would rather press him to surpass the prince. Now, Prince Gong has no chance at all, and if there is any conflict, it will be the conflict between the emperor and the crown prince. The contradiction between these two people is even worse. The queen does not want the emperor to pick on the prince, nor does he want the prince to have resentment against the emperor, so she broke some window papers. She clearly told the emperor that the crown prince and Prince Gong were separated by human life. If she wanted to restore the relationship as Mingda and Zhou Man said, it was not something that could be done overnight. She didn't want the emperor to have too many illusions. I was in the midst of a fantasy, thinking that the emperor, who was traveling with his family in the future, was splashed with a bucket of ice water, turned around and left, ignoring the queen. The queen didn't stop him either, and let him go. The emperor walked around the palace with his hands behind his back, walking, and walked outside the queen mother's palace. It was at dinner time in the evening, and there was still some liveliness in the queen mother's palace. He stopped and asked, "Who's in there?" "It's the Princess Yunfan." She entered the palace to serve the Empress Dowager for dinner. She usually leaves the palace after dinner. The emperor thought of him and the king of Yizhu, and also thought of the attitude of his mother towards him and the king of Yizhu, and he felt even more uncomfortable. When he went to court the next day, he read the censor's suggestion for impeachment and punishment. He was heartbroken, and he endured the criticism. Not to mention the crown prince, the courtiers were all startled and winked. Could the emperor have been caught? Why did you agree to punish King Gong? Or such a heavy punishment? Even old Master Tang was a little uneasy, so he just wrote it casually, because he knew that the emperor would not really punish. Who would have known that the emperor would actually approve this? See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1904. King Gong's broken leg was replaced with the best intermittent ointment, and Xiao Yuan was treating it himself. Even the bruises on his body were treated by Imperial Dr. Zheng himself to remove stasis, and Manbao was not used at all. In the past few days, his food and clothing expenses have also been excellent. The 50 kilograms that he had managed to lose in the first few days has only increased by 4 or 5 kilograms in just 4 or 5 days. It may be because it rose too much at once, all on the long belly and face. Even Princess Gong, who had never cared much about this kind of thing, couldn't help but gently admonish him, not wanting to let King Gong eat more meat. But Prince Gong was not happy. He had been on a diet for so long, and he finally stopped restricting his diet. How could he be able to hold back? As a result, when he was slowly tasting with a bowl of meat soup today, Gu Zhong issued an imperial decree to announce. His leg was broken, it was impossible to kneel, but even when he was sitting on the bed listening, Prince Gong was so shocked that he almost fell off the bed. His first reaction was, "I don't believe it. Is this the will of the father?" Gu Zhong glanced at him sympathetically and replied yes. Yesterday, the emperor was in a bad mood when he came out of the queen's palace. He secretly drank alcohol at night. He almost didn't sleep all night, and he didn't lose his temper when he went to court in the morning. Gu Zhong didn't know what the empress said, but he knew it had a lot to do with today's will. He took the imperial decree and handed it over to the bewildered King Gong. "Hurts you?" King Gong shook his hands and opened the imperial decree. Sure enough, there was his father's jade seal on it. But how is it possible? He was beaten and broke his leg, which turned out to be his fault. Not to mention that he was deprived of a county fief, he was also demoted to the king of the county. Prince Gong looked at the reason above with red eyes. The reason was that he was disrespectful to the prince, spoke ill of the prince, was disrespectful in his heart, and was malicious. This is not true. Why did the emperor suddenly? Why did you do this to him all of a sudden? King Gong grabbed Gu Zhong and asked, "What happened in the front hall?" Gu Zhong respectfully took his hand away, bent over, and said respectfully, "Your Highness, nothing happened in the front hall. Your Majesty is still discussing matters with the adults. The servant will go back to serve first." After saying that, he bent down and stepped back. Xiao Yuanzheng, who came to see King Gong, also took the opportunity to slip away first. Sure enough, he heard the sound of things in the room not long after he walked out. Xiao Yuanzheng couldn't help but glance at Gu Zhong. It happened that Gu Zhong was also turning his head to look at him. The two sides looked at each other. Gu Zhong smiled and said, "Xiao Yuan is going back to the imperial physician's office." Xiao Yuan responded with a yes, and Gu Zhong reminded in a low voice, "The imperial physician Zhou should be preparing to ask for a guilt." Xiao Yuanzhen knew that Zhou Man still did not escape, so he went back and talked to Zhou Man. The past few days have been calm, and Man Bao also went to play with Mingda and the others. Seeing that the emperor no longer bothered them after kneeling, he thought the matter was over. She didn't expect things to take a turn for the worse, and in the end, she still couldn't escape the fate of being punished. After Man Bao found out, he raised his head and said to Bai Shan, "Sure enough, if you make a mistake, you should be punished obediently. All means of escape should not be available." Bai Shan glanced at her and said, "Today's punishment is much lighter than we expected at the beginning, so why is it useless?" Now, several days have passed, not to mention that the emperor has no time to deal with these irrelevant little courtiers. Even if he has time, after these 4 or 5 days of relaxation, his anger has gone down a lot. The punishment given at this time is naturally different from the punishment given by Thunder Fury at that time. Even the ministers who acted according to the rules in the court didn't care about Zhou Man's possible mistakes in this matter. They just scolded her intentionally after asking for a guilt on her, and gave her to the officials in the Ministry of Personnel. After the test is written down, it is over. No demotions, no fines. Man Bao quietly handed over the book, and then got a warning letter from the Ministry of Personnel. This matter was passed quietly, and the rest had nothing to do with her. The ministers didn't have time to stare at her. Everyone thought the emperor was very strange, and they all stared at him quietly. You know, when Prince Gong was taken back to the capital last year, he was suspected of being involved in the murder of the crown prince, and some evidence was found. That's all. The emperor just reprimanded him, banned his feet and took over a county fief from him, but he was not willing to surrender. Sir. As a result, he was demoted this time. They thought the emperor was strange, and they were a little frightened. After inquiring again, the emperor has recently lived in the study in front of the Taiji Hall and has not returned to the main hall. As a result, the ministers were as quiet as chickens. Recently, the voice of the court was much softer. They just didn't want to make the emperor angry. Man Bao knew from Mingda that the emperor and the queen seemed to have quarreled, and he didn't know what the quarrel was about. Anyway, Prince Gong was punished very severely. The prince, who had been out of the ancestral hall for several days, was brought back to kneel for a long time. Was reprimanded by order. But this time, the crown prince didn't have any resentment in his heart. He calmly took Shen Qi, and then watched officials from the Ministry of Rights and Ministry of Industry go to Luozhu to dismantle or transport back the illegal items of Prince Gong's mansion, and the Ministry of Household to take back Prince Gong. In the county that was taken back, so far, King Gong has only a fief of Guo County in Luozhu. The prince also calmed down for 2 days. Seeing that his father was still living in the study and did not return to the main hall, he frowned and said to the prince irritably, "What the hell is he trying to do? What's the matter?" The crown princess could only comfort him, "It's better to let the father and emperor calm down, the mother and the queen are not in a hurry, what are you in a hurry?" The prince was so angry that he exhaled from his nose, got up and said, "I'll go see the queen mother. Mingda will be much calmer. It seems that it is not her parents who are in the Cold War now." She said to Man Bao, "The mother said that our idea is good, but we used the wrong force." Full of question marks. Mingda said, "We thought that in front of the third brother, it would be wrong to say that the prince cares about him, at least not right. The mother said that the most important knot between the prince and the third brother is not the third brother's relationship with the prince. The heart knot is the heart knot of the prince's brother to the third brother. This matter, unless the third brother does it in person, it will not be good. No matter how good it is only superficial. Pretend to look good in front of you." Man Bao, "Why didn't the mother-in-law tell Her Majesty that day?" Mingda said with a smile, "Why else, naturally it's because of us." She said, "The mother doesn't want to ruin our good intentions, and you are indeed innocent. I didn't invite you to Baiyun Temple at that time, or I didn't let you go to see the third brother's injury." Man Bao was very embarrassed, so he whispered, "I was also at fault. I had good medicine at the time, but I specially used the medicinal wine from Baiyun Temple for King Gong. This is also the reason why she and Bai Shan have always been apprehensive and afraid. This kind of thing can be found out as soon as it is checked, and once it is found, it will be unpredictable, which is also one of the main reasons for her punishment." Mingden naturally knew that. She lowered her voice and said, "I know, and the mother also knows that it must be the third brother who said something very unpleasant for you to do this. The 2 servants have recruited." She paused and said, "I sent the 2 of them to the third sister. The third sister is upright. No matter how angry the third brother is, he would not dare to ask the third sister for someone. See you at 9. After reading everyone's recent comments, the undercurrent is surging. Everyone is welcome to have different opinions, everyone can communicate peacefully, and it is okay to not rise from a role to an individual. The last sentence, the emperor is indeed a very flawed person. I do feel that Lu is a pity, so I can't help but mention her, and the biggest rift between the crown prince and Prince Gong is the child back then. No matter how peaceful the appearance, it is impossible that there will be no trace of the injury he has suffered. It's hard to reunite after a broken mirror, not to mention that they almost met each other. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1905. Man Bao let out a breath, took her hand and said, "Mingda, thank you so much." Mingda shook her arm and took Man Bao's hand. She smiled and said, "No need to thank me, I feel much better recently, the bracelet you gave me is very useful, I don't need to take medicine anymore." Mingda paused for a while, but still couldn't help but leaned into Man Bao's ear and asked in a low voice, "For my mother?" Man Bao hurriedly said, "I have people doing it, and I should be able to get it in 2 days. There seems to be some big event in their alliance recently. The store is very busy, and her customizations are in the back, but after so long, it should be her turn soon." Minda breathed a sigh of relief. She dragged Man Bao into the inner room, dragged a box out of the cabinet, and opened it to her. Man Bao saw the yellow gold inside, and for a moment only gold remained in his eyes. She reached out and touched, "You have a lot of money." Mingda smiled, "This is 200 taels of gold, didn't you say that a string of crystals cost at least 1,800 taels, So I'll find someone to exchange 200 taels of gold for you, so that it's easier to get. I'll have someone give it to you when I turn around. Take it home. Manbao couldn't carry such a heavy amount of gold back, right? As soon as Manbao heard that the gold was his own, he instantly felt no more distressed about the more than 1,800 points he had spent on customizing the queen. Manbao smiled and hugged the box. What excuse do you use for me? Mingda said with a smile, there is no reason, I reward you. If the adults really ask, they will say that I am in good shape. If I am happy, I will reward you. Manbao did not refuse, and said, wait until I have a rest before sending it back. When she sent it home, she received it in the system space and played with it by herself. Minda nodded. After getting this fortune, Manbao was very happy, and he couldn't help but worry, are you in a hurry for the quarrel between your majesty and the empress? Mingda shook his head, although I don't know what the father and mother said. The father finally found the third brother, and the punishment was so severe, which means that the father still listened to the mother's words. Enough. Mingda has more experience living with her parents than her two older brothers. Both of her older brothers were taken by her grandma when they were still breastfeeding, but she still slept with her parents until she was 3 or 4 years old. When they were young, the emperor and the empress also quarreled in front of her, but it was not as serious as this time. In the past, the father and the emperor would go out for a walk and come back by themselves. Or the queen mother will send soup and snacks to the father, and then the father will come back. But this time, the queen didn't send soup and snacks, and the emperor came back without turning around. Mingda felt that this was because he didn't have enough time to turn around. After enough time, he would come back naturally. She said, the father's bedroom has always been the mother's middle palace. He can't live in the front study all his life, and he can't hang around with the harem's concubines all the time. He will always come back. And this time, he didn't even go to the harem. When Manbao heard this, she was no longer worried. She thought that the emperor would go back soon, but the emperor still lived in the small study until she went to bed. Manbao received the gift sent by Mingda early in the morning, and asked the inner servant to carry it outside and put it on the car, and then rode home with Bai Shan and Bai Erlang. On the way, Manbao couldn't help but complain, it's not good if there are too many rooms at home. If there is no study and no harem, we will see if he can't go back. Bai Erlang urged her, don't prepare a study room for Shanbao in the future. Bai Shan. He glanced at Bai Erlang, then changed the subject and said, my grandmother and mother are going back to Longzhou for their birthday wishes. They won't be back until late next month. What specialties do you want from Longzhou? After thinking about it, Manbao shook his head, no. Bai Erlang also shook his head. They were unfamiliar with Longzhou and didn't know there were any local specialties that they would miss. Manbao said nervously, we are going to Shangzhou next month. Bai Shan glanced at her sideways and said with a smile, what are you afraid of? This time Uncle Joe is going with us. With adults around, we don't need to come forward for many things. That being said, I was still a little apprehensive. Back at home, Manbao asked people to carry the box back to her room. At this time, there was a lot of fertilization in the field, so there were only the fourth and fifth sisters in the house, and the old Zhutu was still in the village with the big house. So no one asked what was in the full treasure chest. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang went to her room to feel the wealth in the box, and left after touching for a while. It's just that Bai Shan knew why Princess Mingda sent the treasure chest of gold, but Bai Erlang didn't know the reason, and just kept sighing, Princess is really rich. Man Bayadao, it's not that rich either. The money Mingda exchanged with the crown princess, and all her New Year's money has been exchanged. She has a lot of precious things, and it is worth the money if she takes out a few, but the cash is not much. She lives in the palace, and the emperor and queen don't give her anything but money, but all kinds of other valuables. Bai Erlang felt strange now, since there is no cash, why should I reward you with money? Man Bao paused and said, because I like money. Shiro. Bai Erlang looked at the gold in the box, then raised his head to look at Man Bao, and couldn't help but ask, Senior sister, how can I make people like you so much that I will do everything possible to give you the things you love? For the sake of his calling senior sister, Man Bao thought about it seriously and answered him, first of all, you have to be cute. Bai Shan couldn't help laughing softly. Bai Erlang heard that she was mocking him perfunctorily, turned around and left, too lazy to talk to her. Bai Shan is also leaving, you can collect the money. Man Bao responded with a smile, sent them away with a smile, and then put the box into the system space, then took out the gold inside, placed it on the bookshelf one by one, and stacked it up. It was golden and very beautiful. Seeing this, Keek asked, isn't it in a box? Man Bao said, I don't have any good-looking big boxes anymore. I'll see if I have something next time someone gives me something. If I have it, I'll pack it up. It's pretty good looking like this now. Coco. Man Bao said, it feels good to exchange points for money. Man Bao admired it for a while before quitting, and the depressed mood of the past few days dissipated under the stimulation of money. The three of them played happily for 2 days and then entered the palace. The atmosphere was still weird, but it was much more relaxed. Man Bao swayed to visit the two Fenji at the Crown Princess's place, and inquired about the news. By the way, Bai Shan went to Zhao Liaolang and Feng Zonping to play with a few pieces of snacks he brought into the palace. By noon, both of them knew why. I heard that the emperor went back to the Middle Palace. The emperor and the queen didn't quarrel, but they didn't seem to reconcile either, which is strange. But in any case, the emperor was willing to go back, and things were improving. Even the front hall was much more lively. When Man Bao went to the great court meeting the next day, he found that his colleagues were talking a little louder than last time. Man Bao nodded with satisfaction, glanced at the emperor sitting on the top, and lowered his head to hold back his laughter. The county magistrate Guo glanced at her, and began to think about whether to speak to the magistrate Tang and simply change positions with him. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1906. The emperor walked down to the court with a calm face. He did not go to the small study room, nor did he recruit Wei Ji to discuss matters. Instead, he asked Gu Zhong to move all the Jizi to the Middle Palace. As soon as he entered the Middle Palace, the breath of the emperor let out his breath. The queen stepped forward and helped him remove the robe and crown, and then helped him to sit down on the couch. The emperor was still a little embarrassed, but the queen was considerate, so he could only sit on the wooden couch with a straight face and pretend he didn't care. Gu Zhong and Aunt Chang wisely put a small table on the couch, and neatly arranged the folds and the like on the table. The emperor supported his waist and sat cross-legged, and the empress was a little worried. Why don't the imperial Dr. Xian come to take a look? The emperor said solemnly, no, I'm fine. The queen knew that he had a good face, and she definitely didn't want people to know that he fell out of bed last night. After thinking about it, she asked the servants to go down. She brought up a basin of warm water, and waited for him to wash his face and clean his hands first, and then took out a bottle of ointment and said, I'll give your majesty some ointment. The emperor was very skeptical. Can this be wiped on the face? A lot of medicine would be hot when rubbed on his face, and his wound was close to his eyes. He rubbed a little ointment last night and quickly washed it off, feeling like his eyes were going blind. This morning, the queen took the fat powder to cover it up for him, but he still looked a little awkward, but fortunately no one could see it except the people who served him close to him. However, the queen felt that the injury on his face was not important. What mattered was that he accidentally twisted his waist when he fell off the bed. She whispered again, "It's better to call an imperial physician to have a look." The emperor lost his temper and said, "I didn't even say I couldn't watch it, it's not a serious injury." The queen could not mention it and asked, "Are you going to see Saburo today?" "Don't go." The emperor twisted his waist and didn't really want to move around. He was still a little irritable at the moment, so he didn't really want to go, just have someone give him something, let him not think too much, and take care of his legs first. The queen nodded. It is impossible to ask Prince Gong not to think too much. He has received the imperial edict for several days, and the royal father has only come to see him once. Today, he wants to change his medicine. King Gong had to think more in his heart. Xiao Yuan was dismantling the board, cleaned the injured leg, and applied intermittent ointment again. Seeing Prince Gong raising his leg, he quickly and gently lifted it up, warning, "Your Highness, this leg cannot be moved, or the bones will be broken. Misalignment will make you crooked, and once your legs are crooked, you will be lame." Prince Gong lowered his eyes and glanced at his injured leg, and after a moment of stiffness, he did not move. Xiao Yuan is continuing to give him medicine. King Gong asked, "If the leg is crooked, can you make it grow back?" Xiao Yuan Zhang said with a smile, "It is possible to interrupt the connection again. But re-interrupting it will definitely be extremely painful, mainly because who can hit the originally broken bone again and break it with such precision? So this kind of thing only exists in the theory of medical classics, and there is no successful case yet." Under the quilt, Prince Gong's hand trembled slightly, wanting to clench it, but slowly loosened it. He asked Xiao Yuan Zhang calmly, "When will this king's leg heal?" Xiao Yuan Zhang said, "His Royal Highness has been taking care of it well for the past few days. After changing the medicine a few times, you can get out of bed and practice walking in a month. After that, you can exercise every day, and you will be back to normal in a month or two." Xiao Yuan Zhang paused and said, "But in the future, I will stop sprinting and climbing. After all, Prince Gong is too fat, and walking is a burden, not to mention sprinting and climbing, which will cause more damage to the injured leg in a short period of time." King Gong pursed his lips and replied glumly. The prince agreed to let Zhou Man take a leave of absence to go to Shangzhou, so before taking a rest again, Man Bao handed in a letter of leave, and wanted to take about 7 days of leave. In this way, counting the 2 days of this time off and the next 2 days, she has 11 days of vacation, and Shangzhou is not far away. She estimates that 7 or 8 days will be enough to find her mother's house and deal with it. Good thing. The prince forgot about it, but she remembered it as soon as she mentioned it. He didn't read Zhou Man's booklet that he was going to take a few days off. Say hello. Yes, Man Bao has 2 immediate bosses, one is Xiao Yuan Zheng and the other is Kong Jiju. Kong Jiju didn't want to criticize, but when he heard that she was going to look for relatives, Confucianism put filial piety first, so he approved it, and then when he raised his hand, he saw Bai Shan and Bai Erlang's leave application, he frowned and asked, "Zhou full of going to find relatives, what are these 2 going to do?" Mr. Zhuang, who also handed in the leave certificate, cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "They are worried that their senior sister will not be able to find their relatives, so they went to help." Mr. Zhuang said, "I don't know about offering sacrifices, but Zhou Man's life experience was only known to her when she grew up. She never knew she had a mother-in-law's family before, when her father joined the Xia family, and he brought his wife and daughter back after his parents-in-law passed away. Township, it's been 14 years since I've been here, I'm afraid that Shangzhou is also a matter of right and wrong." Kong Jiju frowned and said, "That said, they are students, and students should focus on their studies." Mr. Zhuang responded quickly, then took out his leave application and said, "So the lower officials decided to go with them and supervise them all the way, so that they will not waste their studies. Kong sacrifice wine." He looked at Zhuang Sun, and then lowered his head to look at the leave book handed in front of him. He vaguely felt why Bai Shan and the others were like this. It is said that the apprentice Xiao is his teacher, the son Xiao is his father. Kong Jiju stretched out his hand to take the book and opened it, and asked, "Does the prince agree?" Zhuang Sun did not have many classes in 10 days, only 3 classes, but he still had 2 small classes for the prince. Kong Jiju had to admit that Zhuang Sun had a certain ability to teach students, at least the prince could listen to him. Lessons and exhortations. Zhuang Sun said with a smile, "I told His Highness, but His Highness said that this is the internal affairs of Chongguan Hall, and it is time to ask about the sacrificial wine." Kong Jiju felt a little more comfortable, and after pondering for a while, he approved it, and then put the book aside and said, "Go early and return early." Mr. Zhuang saluted gratefully and said yes. In addition to Bai Shan and Bai Erlang's leave application, Zhuang Sun's and Zhou Man's papers had to be sent to the Ministry of Officials for the record. Not in the holidays and family leave stipulated by the imperial court, they will have to deduct the corresponding salary when they ask for leave. Knowing the exact approval, Man Bao ran to He Mingde and said, "I won't enter the palace in the next 10 days. If you have something to do, write to my family. If it is urgent, my family will send a message to me." It was only 10 days ago, and Mingde didn't think he would need to write to her, but he still responded with a smile. Man Bao took out a box from his arms and said, "This is the crystal bead string I made for the queen, you can take it to the empress." Mingde took it and saw that the crystal was white, but the dark stone in the middle was exactly the same as hers. She knew that the most important thing was not the crystal, but this stone. She nodded, and He Manbao promised not to tell her. Man Bao slammed her, "How about you make an offering for 7749 days before Lao Tzu's statue before giving it to the empress?" Mingde smiled and nodded, "Okay. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1907. When Man Bao left the palace the next day, Mingde had already dug out a statue of Lao Tzu from the warehouse, and he also learned Man Bao to offer up the crystal bracelet. Old Zhutu knew that they were going to take a leave of absence this time to go to Shangzhou, and he felt a little nervous. He hesitated for a while, but he still brought the eldest and 5th with him. He felt that he would be more confident with more sons. Mrs. Lu is also going back to Longzhou. The old lady of the Zhang family in Longzhou is going to have a long birthday. This time it is a big one, and she wants them to gain a firm foothold in Longzhou again, so she went back. She didn't ask Bai Shan to go back with her. She said, "We haven't been in Longzhou for many years, although we still walk with relatives, but after all, we haven't seen each other for many years, and many feelings have faded. I don't know what's going on now, so you don't have to go back with us." He added, "This time you can accompany Man Bao to Shangzhou. Let's see what's going on with the Xia family. In the future, your children will have a surname Sui Xia. This is a big deal, and it can't be sloppy." Bai Shan responded respectfully and sent his grandmother and mother out of the city that day, and they packed up their things and set off the next day. The 3 of them did not ride in a carriage, but rode their horses and ran ahead. Shangzhou was not very far from the capital. Even if they were a little slower, they would arrive around noon the next day. In the evening, a group of people stopped at a post station on the side of the road. Although Man Bao is not a public office, she is an official and can still reduce some fees. Old Zhutu also enjoyed the benefits of being an official when he went out for the first time. While enjoying the flattery of the station staff, he quietly said to Qian, "It is really good to be an official. Shangguan, wouldn't our family not have to spend money when we travel again?" "Qian, didn't you hear what Man Bao said? You need to be with them. They are all busy. Where can you accompany you to stay at the inn?" Not many of them came, only Zhou Dalan and Weavolang followed, and the rest were Daji and other guards. Because Xiao Qian's family didn't follow, they didn't cook halfway through, but took out the dry food Xiao Qian's family had prepared for them and nodded, then took out a bamboo tube and drank 2 sips of water before continuing on their way. Finally arrived in Shangzhou at noon the next day. Shangzhou is not very far from the capital, and most of the business travelers from the south and southwest to Beijing pass through here, so Shangzhou is much more lively than Mianzhou. Manbao led the horse into the city, and saw the passing hawkers shouting loudly, and her eyes landed on the noodle stall by the roadside after looking around. The stall owner was holding a lump of noodles and a knife, and he was slicing the noodles into the pot. After a while, a bowl came out. And green vegetables, the woman on the side added something to the bowl, and it was on the table in no time. When Manbao saw the meat foam on his face, he couldn't move any more. Bai Shan pulled her and saw that she was still, and asked, "Hungry?" Manbao nodded. Bai Shan looked back at Daji who was escorting the carriage in, and said, "It's noon, let's have lunch here and then go find a place." In fact, Daji has already arranged for a guard to advance to the city, but the other party may not be familiar with Shangzhou, and he has not seen anyone yet. So he nodded after thinking about it, and then he greeted everyone to park the carriage by the side, and let Lao Zhutu and the others get out of the car, and then eat dinner first. Manbao immediately ran to help her mother, Bai Shan went to help Mr. Chuang, and Bai Erlang had already run to the booth and occupied several positions. After everyone sat down at 2 tables and ordered noodles, Lao Zhutu looked around and said, "Shangzhou looks more lively than our Mianzhou." Old Zhutu has only been to Mianzhou 3 or 4 times in his life, and the most recent one was because he was going to Beijing. But there are not many people, the heat is not lively, but it can be seen at a glance. The stall owner on the side shaved the noodles for them, and said proudly, "Our Shangzhou is the gateway to the capital, and it is naturally more prosperous." "Where are you in Mianzhou?" He simply did not know where Mianzhou was. In fact, they knew very little except for the surrounding prefectures and counties and the capital. Old Zhutu also said proudly, "Our Mianzhou is also the gateway to Yizhu city." "Is the city of Yizhu very big?" "I have heard of a king of Yizhu, who rebelled the year before, and scared me. I thought there was going to be another war." Old Zhutu. "Why did King Yizhu replace them in Yizhu?" Old Zhutu didn't want to mention Yizhu, and instead said, "Our Mianzhou is also very good. Our Mianzhou's kuakui is delicious." The stall owner said, "Our Shangzhou noodles are also delicious, especially mine. It is a must in Shangzhou. It's a good bowl of le, you can try it." Old Zhutu had an intuition that he was lying. If he was the best in Shangzhou, would he still set up a stall at the gate of the city? Just as he was about to refute, Bai Shan had already opened his mouth and asked, "I heard this from the old man is very familiar with Shangzhou." The stall owner glanced at Bai Shan and couldn't help laughing, "Of course I'm familiar, my ancestors are all from Shangzhou, and my father has set up a stall at the gate of the city to cut noodles, but the young man is young, so he doesn't dare to be a child. Your grandfather and I should be the same generation." While speaking, he stretched out his finger and pointed at Lao Zhou's head. Bai Shan stopped talking. Manbao raised his head and said, "This is my father, his future father-in-law." When the stall owner heard this, he was stunned for a moment, and then smiled awkwardly, "That's it?" However, he quickly reacted and began to praise the old Zhou desperately, "Brother, you are so lucky, your daughter looks lucky, look at this round face, and then look at this white and tender appearance, your son-in-law. It looks like a talent." Only then did the old Zhutu become happy, and said proudly, "Of course, my daughter is the most fortunate." Bai Shan cleared his throat and brought the topic back to what he wanted to ask, "Is that old man familiar with people from Shangzhou?" The stall owner talked to Bai Shan while cutting the noodles, "Is the young master here to marry?" Bai Shan replied with a smile, "There is a relative in Shangzhou, but I don't know where they live, but their surname is Xia." Bai Shan glanced at Man Bao and said, singularly named Taboyan, he is a scholar. The stall owner thought hard for a while, but when he didn't remember it, he smiled and said, our Shangzhou is also very big. Man Bao asked, then do you know where Songhua Lane is? I know, go down this street, turn west at the third intersection, turn south again, and go down 2 intersections to the west of Songhua Lane. Where do your relatives live? The stall owner thought about it. Thinking, frowning, Songhua Lane Xiaozuoki. Songhua Lane doesn't have Zioki now, but there was a Xiaozuoki more than 10 years ago. When everyone's spirits were lifted, Bai Shan said, it's that Xiaozuoki. The stall owner looked at Bai Shan, looked at Zhou Man, and smiled, I'm afraid it's a misunderstanding, that Xiaozuoki was gone more than 10 years ago, and there is no one at home. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1908. Man Bao suddenly felt a little sour in his heart and asked, there are still some relatives, right? The stall owner said, I haven't heard of it. Why, Xiao Laoxiu is really the person you are looking for. Seeing that the smile on Man Bao's face was gone, Bai Shan hurriedly said, maybe yes, so I want to find out if there are any relatives in their family. If not, then who lives in the house they used to live in now? I don't know. Young master can go to Songhua Lane and ask. Bai Shan thanked him, and the guards who had come to Shangzhou early to find them had already booked an inn for them. After a few people ate the noodles, they went to the inn to put their luggage and rest, and then they asked people to inquire about Songhua Lane. There are 2 deeds in the bundle that Man Bao found in the mountains, one for the house and one for the pavement. There are 3 land deeds and 2 household registrations. It is also because Xia Xian's household registration has Xia Yan's name on it, so that Man Bao can know the name of his grandfather, which is easier to find. Otherwise, it would be difficult to find only her mother's name, because in this era, women rarely have permanent births and walk outside. The sun was too bright, so Bai Shan put on a bamboo hat and went out, and said to Mr. Zhuang, who was sleepy, and said, Sir and the old man are resting at home first. Let's go to Songhua Lane to find out. The old Zhu immediately assigned Zhou Dalan and Wu Lang to say, you go with your sister, but you should be optimistic about people, don't let the Xia family snatch people away. Wu Lang felt that his father thought too much. If there was no one in the aunt's family, I'm afraid no one in the Xia family would be happy to see Man Bao appear, let alone rob someone. Man Bao said, let's inquire separately, eldest brother, you and 5th brother go and find this shop. This is the title deed that my little father received. Zhou Dalan reached out and took it, and nodded after discussing with Wu Lang, then let's go. Go. Zhou Dalan and Wu Lang are not worried about the 3 of them going out alone. In terms of their experience of going out, the 3 of them are much richer than the 2 brothers. Because they didn't know how big Shangzhou was, Man Bao and the 3 took their horses when they went out. Daegil followed them with only 1 bodyguard. The 5 people rode their horses and walked down the street, and when they asked someone, they went to Songhua Alley. Along the way, the 3 of them looked around, looking down at the stalls and shops on both sides of Shangzhou Street. When we turned to Songhua Alley, there were not many people here. It was the afternoon, only a few children were playing in the alley, and there were basically no adults in sight. Man Bao dismounted, looked up at the account number on the portal, and followed it down, but some people did not register an account number. So they couldn't find them all, but generally the household numbers were regular, so they calculated in their hearts, went down the alley, looked back and forth between the 4 houses, and knocked on the door of one house. This house could vaguely hear chickens crowing inside, apparently someone lived there. A few people heard the footsteps, and the door opened in a short while. Seeing that it was a woman, Bai Shan took a step back and let Man Bao step forward. Man Bao smiled subconsciously, bowed first, and then asked, May I ask this sister, which one is number 23 Song Hua Lane? Number 23, she was stunned for a moment and then smiled. The little lady suddenly asked this question, I don't know which one it is, I don't even know my family number. She walked out the door and asked with a smile, the little lady is looking for someone? I don't know what her surname is. The last name is Xia, Man Bao said after a pause, I was a scholar more than 10 years ago, and their family used to live here. We have a family with the surname Xia, but they don't have scholars. Did you remember it wrong? Bai Shan asked, I don't know which family is Xia. No, just face the door. The three turned their heads to look, and after thanking her, decided to ask. Man Bao was a little nervous, swallowed his saliva, stepped forward, raised his hand and knocked on the door. As a result, she just knocked, and the door opened a crack. Only then did a few people realize that the door had been left open. The people inside the door also seemed to hear the movement, and a female voice said loudly, Come in, the door is not closed. Man Bao pushed open the door and was able to see the yard at a glance. There is a pole hanging on the left side of the yard, and a lot of clothes are hung on it. There is a concierge by the door. One person came out of the kitchen wiping his hands. He saw the person standing at the door and asked, Who are you? I thought it was the sister-in-law Fang next door. The three hurriedly bowed and said, Sister-in-law, we are here to find someone. She frowned and said, Who are you looking for? The eldest sister, who was watching the excitement behind Man Bao and the others, immediately raised her voice, Sister Xia, they are here to find a Zioki Xia. I said that there are no scholars in our alley, but they still don't believe it. I don't know if it's from your family. Relative. Sister-in-law Xia frowned and said, We don't have talents in our family, are you looking for the wrong one? However, Man Bao looked around the yard, and after a while, he looked back at her and asked, Does this sister-in-law recognize a scholar named Xia Yan? Sister Xia's complexion changed slightly, and she subconsciously denied, I don't know, you are looking in the wrong place. The three of them are not stupid. When they see her face wrong, they know they have an inside story, but Sister Xia doesn't give them a chance to speak again, and just drives them out. My family is going to cook, hurry up and don't disturb us. After that, close the door. The neighbor's sister couldn't help but said, Sister Xia, it's already this hour and you haven't had lunch yet? Don't all your children run out to play? We need you to take care of our family's affairs. The long-tongued woman who stares at other people's yard when she's full and has nothing to do. The neighbor's sister obviously didn't expect to be scolded, so she scolded back for a while, Gao Shi, who are you talking about? I kindly give directions to your relatives. Did you really do something wrong and dare not let people find you? The two quarreled directly with saliva. The three Man Bao were so frightened that they backed away again and again, squeezed to the side, and watched the two quarrel while pinching their waists. Bai Shan took out his handkerchief and wiped his face, and said with a look of disgust, I want to wash my face. Man Bao glanced at it and said, I have to ask where the well is here. Bai Shan nodded, turned around and said, Let's go, go ahead and ask those children. Bai Erlang said, Just leave like this. Bai Shan said, Otherwise, do you want to stay and quarrel with them? He said, I can't quarrel with her. Man Bao also said, I can't be noisy either. Bai Erlang, then don't look for it. Bai Shan glanced at him and said, It's confirmed, it's this house. It's not, it must have something to do with the people in this house, and the rest is just looking for the head of the Li. I don't even know what the relationship is. With a black eye, how can we talk to them? He said, Let's find the Rihong first, or go directly to the county magistrate. If they were by Ding, naturally they wouldn't think about going to the county magistrate, but Man Bao was an official, and the two of them were also students of Chongguan Museum. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1909. The three of them retreated while talking, and soon they were far away from the battlefield. They first asked the children playing in the alley for directions and found the well. There is little water in the north, so few people can dig a well by themselves. Mostly, the Rihong decides where to dig a well and everyone uses it together. The well was not very far from where they were, and although it was noon, there were still many people fetching water to wash their clothes. Bai Erlang ran at the front, borrowed a bucket from the person by the well and threw it down, clumsily filling up a small half bucket of water, but it was enough for them. He summoned water to clean his hands, and waved to Bai Shan's human, "Hurry up." Bai Shan stepped forward to wash the handkerchief, and then wiped his face with disgust. Man Bao also recruited water to wash her hands. She was lucky. When the two started quarreling, she stood behind Bai Shan. The two of them squatted aside and smiled and watched Bai Shan wash his face. The person washing clothes by the well also stared at Bai Shan, and a woman couldn't help but sighed, "Young master looks so good looking." Bai Shan blushed slightly, thanked the person for his compliment politely, and then asked casually, "I don't know where is the residence house here." Everyone couldn't help but look at Bai Shan and the three of them, and couldn't help but inquire, "Is there something wrong with Lang Jun looking for our lieutenant?" Bai Shan smiled politely, "We came from the capital to find relatives, but we haven't been in contact for many years. It seems that relatives have changed places, so I want to inquire with the chief." Everyone was excited when they heard it, and said, "The relatives Lang Jun is looking for are near us? Then ask us, we have always lived here, and we know a little bit." Bai Shan's eyes slid over them. "He will do laundry here, and he will never grow old. The oldest one is only in his 30s. There are only 6 people in total, and the other 5 people are watching." She was even smaller, she looked about the same age as Saturday's sister-in-law, and both wore women's buns. Apparently they all married here, but Bai Shan didn't really believe it if they said they lived here all the time. However, there are many rumors and few secrets in the neighborhood. Just now, the sister-in-law Xia didn't look very good. She didn't have a good relationship. People must like to talk about her family more, maybe they really know something. So Bai Shan found a stone next to him and sat down to talk to them. "It's a relative of the older generation. We are young and haven't been here. We haven't been in contact for more than 10 years, and we don't know where we are." He asked with a smile, "Does my sister-in-law know that there was a scholar named Xia here more than 10 years ago? There is only one daughter in the family. I heard that she was recruited later." The oldest one was stunned for a moment and looked at Bai Shan in surprise. The young daughter-in-law on the side has already opened her mouth and said with a smile, "I've never heard of such a family. Did the young master remember it wrong? We don't have any family here." Bai Shan looked at the older woman. She hesitated for a while, then looked at Bai Shan curiously and asked, "Is Lang Jun a relative of the Xia family?" Bai Shan nodded with a smile. She frowned, "I've never heard that the Xia family has such a relative outside." She looked at Bai Shan in a wrong way, and her enthusiasm faded a lot, but she still said, "But more than 10 years ago, there was indeed a family surnamed Xia who was a scholar, and they were long gone. A girl was recruited. It's just that she left with her husband and never came back." Having said that, she paused and looked at Bai Shan suspiciously again, but seeing that he was a boy and not the right age, she turned her eyes to Zhou Man, who had been squatting quietly beside him. Taking a closer look, her eyes widened slightly, staring at Zhou Man and looking up and down. Man Bao moved back slightly by the look in her eyes. Bai Shan got up and walked to Man Bao to block her, and smiled with the woman, "Does that sister-in-law know who is living in his house now?" I don't know who there are relatives in his house. The woman leaned back and wanted to take another look at Joe Man. Seeing that he moved again to block her gaze, she said helplessly, the one who lives in his house is a nephew from his own family. She looked around, lowered her voice and asked, are you from Xian's family? Where are Xian's mother and Zhou Xianggong? Bai Shan just smiled, stretched out his hand and pulled Man Bao up from the ground, and said to her, we are here to look for relatives, I don't know how to get to the head's house. The woman showed them the way full of energy, go in from there, and go out at the intersection ahead. You go out, and when you reach the street, go to the second house on the right. She wanted to take another look at Zhou Man behind him, but was blocked by Bai Shan. Bai Shan thanked her, pulled Man Bao and left. The three of them left quickly, almost running. Man Bao patted his chest and said happily, it seems like he's going to eat me. Bai Shan said, you must look like Uncle Joe or Aunt Joe. Man Bao tilted his head for a while and said, I just always hear my dad say that I look like my dad. People in the village also say that I look like my dad. I think it should be like my dad, right? Bai Shan led her to go to Li Chang's house, and smiled when he heard the words, that's good, it saves you some trouble if you look like it. And behind them, after they left, the woman put all the clothes in the tub with excitement, and left. The little daughter-in-law on the side couldn't help but said, Aunt Fan, are you not washing? No more washing, I'll go home first. The young daughters-in-law watched her put the unwashed clothes into the wooden bucket, their eyes straightened, and they secretly said, if you go back like this, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law may have another quarrel. Aunt Fan didn't care. She hugged the wooden basin and walked quickly. When she got home, she threw the wooden basin in the yard. Her son opened his mouth when he saw it, and her mother-in-law saw it too. She was about to scold her, but she was already excited. Mother, do you know who is back? Who's back? You can't throw away the tub like this, there are only a few tubs in the house. Wait, have you washed your clothes? It's the Xiniang family that has returned. Who is Xiniang? Aunt Fan pointed to the next door and said, Xiniang. Her family's Xiniang is back. The old lady's eyes widened slightly, and she didn't care about the tub and clothes. She grabbed her sleeve and asked, really? Where is the person? As he spoke, he pricked up his ears and listened to the movement next door. No, I only heard the next door quarrel with the Gao family today, but nothing else. Have you seen Xiniang? Aunt Fan's body froze, and then she remembered something was wrong. She hadn't seen Xiniang, and if Xiniang came back, she could go directly to her own home. Why did she come to ask her about relatives at home? Seeing that her daughter-in-law was in a daze again, the old lady said angrily, you are talking nonsense again. There are shadows and shadows, I didn't see Xiniang, but I saw Xiniang's daughter. Really, mother, that child looks 14 or 15 years old, and the age is not to say. That little face, with Zhou Xianggong, looks very similar, with a pair of eyes, just like she was cut out of her father and put on her, and her forehead and chin are very similar to Xiniang, so she must be the child of the two of them. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1910. The old lady looked at her daughter-in-law suspiciously. Really? Really, Aunt Fan emphasized, it's really similar. That face is especially similar to Zhou Xianggong, and she is as petite as Xian Niang. Okay, okay, the old lady frowned, since they're back, why don't they come directly? Aunt Fan swallowed her saliva and lowered her voice, Mother, do you think that Zhou Xianggong and Xiniang? No, otherwise, why would they let a child ask around? They haven't shown up for so many years. Xia Xian and Zhou Yin didn't come back after they left. Neighbors have guessed everything. Many people think that there is something wrong with the two of them, but some people think that the couple forgot their origins and will never come back after leaving. Some people think it's wrong, how to say, The Xia family's property is still here. Zhou Yin sold 2 pieces of land when he left, but still left 3 pieces, not to mention that there is still a shop and a house. How could the couple keep silent without dealing with it? Some people suspected that Zhou Yin was a liar and deceived Xia Xian, and the family was not sure what it was like. Aunt Fan still had a lot of little things to say, but her mother-in-law gave her a sideways glance and asked, "Where's that person?" Aunt Fan was stunned for a moment and then said, "I'm going to the resident's house, I'll show you the way." When the old lady heard this, she frowned and said, "Why did you let them go to Li Chang's house first? You should let them go to Xiaorui's house first." Aunt Fan slapped her thigh. "Ouch, I forgot." The old lady turned around and left, and Aunt Fan was eager to follow. The old lady didn't want to take her, but she was someone who had seen each other, so she could only take it with her. "Mother, shall we go to Li Chang's house or Xiaorui's house?" "Go to Xiaorui's house, people are already in the door now, we are not close to each other, what are we going to do at the Li Kang's house?" At this time, the 3 of Manbao were sitting at the headmaster's house and drinking tea. Hearing that Bai Shan was looking for Xia Yan, he opened his eyes to look at the 3 of them, and finally slid back and forth on the 3 of them and settled on Zhou. With a full body, he asked with a smile, "I don't know what is the relationship between the 3 and Xia Yan." Bai Shan looked at Manbao. Manbao put down the teacup and said with a smile, "My mother's name is Tabu, and she is the only daughter of Mr. Xia." Even if he already had speculation in his heart, when he heard Zhou Man's confession at this time, Li Chang was still shocked, and then asked, "Why don't your father and mother come?" He said, "I haven't seen them for many years, and I don't know if they are all right." Manbao and Bai Shan looked at each other and said, "My father and mother are gone, so I am here to find relatives." The head of the rib sighed and said, "But your grandparents are long gone. Your parents buried it back then." "Why, didn't they tell you?" Bai Shan's eyebrows twitched, and he turned his head to look at Manbao, who happened to be looking at him as well. Bai Shan shook his head slightly, and Manbao smiled and said, "I know, but I just thought that there are still some relatives in the house, and even if they are far away, they should move around, so I wanted to ask the Riverner." The chief smiled and said, "Little lady is in love, but the Xia family doesn't seem to have much relatives, and I don't know much, or the little lady goes to the Xia clan to ask." Manbao nodded with a smile, and asked, "Does the Li chief know where the tombs of my grandparents are? I want to go to worship one or two." In the eyes of people from Shangzhou, Zhou Yin was in the family, and the 2 Xia family were Zhou Man's grandparents, not maternal grandparents. The lieutenant shook his head with a look of regret. "I really don't know about this, I have to ask the Xia clan." Manbao didn't ask for it, nodded slightly and asked, "Then who is the current patriarch of the Xia clan, and where is his home?" "Xia Zioki seems to be from Hongtian village. It was only after he passed the examination that he moved to the city. I am not very familiar with Hongtian village. It's better for the little lady to go to Hongtian village and ask." Manbao responded with a smile, thanked him and asked, "I wonder how far Hongtian village is from the city." The chief smiled and said, "It's not close, it's better for the little lady to wait until tomorrow morning to set off." Manbao nodded with a smile, and went out after saying goodbye to the chief. The 3 took the horse from Daji, bowed to the Li Long who sent it out, and then got on the horse and left. The lieutenant saw them riding horses, his eyes flashed slightly, and he watched them leave with a smile. When he was far away, Bai Erlang made a sarcastic sound. Bai Shan and Manbao both glanced at him and asked him to hold back before saying, "Let's go to the county office." Manbao nodded, "I should have gone to the Yamen now, but unfortunately I came out in a hurry and didn't bring anything for the magistrate." Bai Shan turned to look at Daji. Big Kada immediately took out 2 letters of worship from his arms and handed them to Bai Shan. Bai Shan handed it to Manbao, "Use my post, or yours." After thinking about it, Man Bao said, use mine, I am the victim, and I should be quite famous. Bai Shan is now quite famous in Chilan, and his prestige must be on Zhou Man, because of his upright, not afraid of the powerful history, as well as his pure and filial behavior, and his qualifications as a companion in the Chongquen Museum. I'm afraid he is a shining future star in the eyes of others. But his power is in the future, and Manbao's power is in the present. It doesn't matter whether others can see her as a female official, her official rank is placed here, she is still a celebrity in front of the prince, and she is also in front of the emperor. There are a few things to say, so even if she is not a star, she is not a small mountain, which is very oppressive. Bai Shan took her post and handed it to Daji, send someone to take it to the county government first, we'll be there in a while. Daji responded, and asked another guard to take the doorpost to deliver it first, and they slowly rode behind to follow, and discuss it by the way. It's biased from a long look, I'm afraid it has something to do with the people who live in your house now, Bai Shan said, 14 years, it's been a matter of fact, the land deeds and house deeds that your father put away have long been known to be cheap. Whoever, what they swallowed may not be willing to spit it out again, do you want to take it back intact? Man Bao thought for a while and then said, I have to find my grandparents' tombs first and take a look at the situation. If someone has worshipped them in the past 14 years, I should also give him something. If, it should be mine. Of course I want to get it back. Bai Shandao, I don't think the uncle doesn't want to stay in Shangzhou. He didn't even hear him talk about these house deeds and land deeds along the way. With the character of the old Zhutu, this is actually a bit strange. Man Bao coughed lightly and then whispered, my father actually whispered to my mother. He is distressed at the moment, but he is a little guilty. Manbao didn't know it at first, but he didn't know if Keek could always scan it, so it was a little annoying, so he let Manbao know. She said, my father doesn't want me to change my surname. See you at 6 p.m.